Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you all for coming. Um, Before I begin, let me just try to point you out to the kind of research that we are doing here at the JCPA on these issues of the global campaign to delegitimize Israel. We took upon ourselves the main question, which is who is really out there? Meaning there is someone or some factors or bodies actually leading this campaign. This is not something coming out of the blue. Okay, so here you have two main publications we've published so far. One of them tried to map the UK arena, which is one of the main hubs, as we called it, uh, one of the main global hubs. Other hubs of importance are, of course, the United States, South Africa. There are other countries in Europe in which this is actually pending. We have a publication that we worked on, which will hopefully see the light very soon, which also continue to other places in Europe. The second publication that you see also shows you the Turkish structure of the Muslim Brotherhood. Okay, we will touch in all these issues as we go on, and also explains to you how, the flotilla in which the Mavi Marmara took part. Sorry, has been known by mistake as the Turkish flotilla. Okay, I mean Turkey played a very important role. It wasn't the only factor there. The most important factor in this flotilla was the global Muslim Brotherhood. This one dealt with the Turkish part of it specifically because of its importance. Okay, so let's just begin. Actually, in the end. Okay, this is some kind of a chart which I tried to put together. Meaning, if we are talking about the global campaign to delegitimize Israel, and first of all, I need to define it. Okay, by speaking about delegitimacy of Israel, I'm talking about factors who are at best supporters of the one-state solution. Okay, this is very important for us to understand first. Okay, no one from the core of the activists can really be called a peace activist, okay, as they would like to call themselves, because still globally it is still accepted that we are trying to find a two-state solution. These people, especially the core of the activists, are not supporting this. Okay, it has nothing to do with Israeli policies any longer. It has nothing to do with Israeli borders. It has to do with the existence of Israel itself as the Jewish state. Okay, this is something that we must state before we begin. As we see, these are built by, or this campaign is built by various groups which were never at the center of any political mainstream of any country. Okay, they are coming from the far sides. Okay, and we will touch on each issue separately. We need to understand that they are built up of coalitions. They don't have any clear hierarchy. However, they are more of coalitions of interests, and therefore it is important to understand the whole structure, but also important to try to understand why each one of them is or has become involved in this campaign. One more thing, again, I mean, Tzvi reminded us of the BDS movement. I'm actually talking about two major international expressions of this campaign, which is the BDS movement on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have what we call international mobilization or direct action. This we have, or the next phase. Okay, I mean, you saw there were land convoys, there were flotillas, there was an attempt, a failed attempt to have a flightilla, what they call. They tried to fly to Ben Gurion Airport. In the end of the month, the 13th of March, we are planned to have what they call now the Global March to Jerusalem. Okay, this is something, again, international, organized and planned by these very same people, the same people who pulled together the flotilla. And this is something, again, I mean, it's very, very soon to know what will happen eventually. And I also wrote a short briefing about it, which is available on the JCPOA's website. Okay, but again, I mean, these are the two main movements at the moment. And also important to understand, again, I mean, the political struggle has always been there, okay, for many, many years. However, at this stage, okay, in this specific campaign, we are talking about a main boost, if you want, towards political struggle, aside, not instead of resistance or terror, but aside of it, which started for all sides, or for all sides concerning with the Palestinian issue specifically at around 2007, 2008, especially after especially following Operation Cast Lead in Gaza at the end of 2008 and the beginning of 2009. Okay, yeah, let me remind these issues afterwards. And again, I mean, since none of these groups actually belong to mainstream politics anywhere, they try to go to places in which they can, first of all, mainstream themselves, and secondly, also find platforms for recruitment for their objectives. One of them, an important center, is the academic world, which is on the side of people who lecture there or teach there, is a natural place for radical views, and on the side of student activism, of course, this is something that they can approach. We are also talking about the media as much as possible, the growing NGO, civil society throughout the world, the trade unions. Again, I mean, we have an involvement of various far left elements and also Islamist factions who have been for many, many years close to trade unions around the world, and trade unions are, of course, the natural place for more leftist views. Various political echelons. Actually, I think in the past year and a half, 2 years, not only the European Parliament and other parliamentarians in Europe and in the West, but also very much in the various structures of the UN. Okay, there are many bodies in the UN which first of all deal with directly with the Palestinian issue, but the UN itself has also been giving platform to the NGO international community, and this is a growing role which they play there as well. Finally, when applies to religious issues, they also go to churches and to these places, but not this only when relevant. Okay? Okay, so now let's try to explain again, I mean, as briefly as possible, the rationale of each of these sides and why it is involved in this campaign. Okay, we will start with the far left. Far left, I'm talking about various groups of the far left. Okay, this is not as it used to be in the old times. It's not only communists, but also anti-globalists, anarchists, you name it. All people coming from the far left. And they are actually, I think, still, until today, the gurus, if you want, of this campaign. They are all holding post-colonial theories from the houses of Chomsky, of Edward Said, and in these theories, Israel is some kind of an imperialist or a white enclave in the Middle East. Okay, they have been for many years working through civil society NGOs around the world. Of course, the place where it all started for them is the Durban, or the first Durban conference in 2001. And I'm sure you probably all know, you're probably very much familiar with these subjects. All the NGO forum, which took place aside this conference, and spoke about Israel in terms of apartheid, ethnic cleansing. This is all started from there. Okay. I haven't noted it here, but we need, again, I mean, if we talk about the European far left, which is, again, the main guru, first of all, we need to remember that these people there have been having ties with Fatah and with all the Marxist, the Palestinian Marxist fronts like the PFLP, DFLP since the 1960s. Okay? Now, since more or less the collapse of the Soviet Union, they also started to see in the Islamist side a very interesting factor. Okay? Today, actually, many of them say that since we live in a world that in which the United States is considered the only international force, then again, I mean, many of them actually say that they see Islam or Islamism. Okay, we will explain what Islamism means very soon. But they see it as the only organized force in the world which is able to provide some kind of a battle against US hegemony. Okay? As part of this thing, of course, part of them, or a large part of them, also see resistance, what we call terror, and they call mukawama. They also see resistance as a legitimate tool. Okay? We need to understand. I mean, they actually justify it, many of them. A new level, if you want, of linkage started between these sides, the far left and the Islamist side, following the declaration by President Bush of the war on terror, which followed the 9/11 terrorist attacks. They actually say, you know, I mean, there is no such a thing as a war on terror. If you want to declare a war, you need to declare a war against the country, against something, but this for them at least was a war against a conception, okay, something which is not accepted by them. The far left, by its nature, has to be based on ongoing campaigning and activism, and this is what we see. Okay, I mean, we already mentioned, we saw the land convoys, we saw the flotillas. There is now this global march, this forthcoming global march towards the end of the month. And there are many campaigns. Okay, the BDS is campaigning all the time. This is the way that the far left must be working by definition. Okay. Lastly, of course, they rely on past experiences, like the campaign against the war in Vietnam and South Africa. Not only that they rely on them, but part of the original leaders are still involved in international level. We have people deeply involved in this campaign, like Tariq Ali from the United Kingdom, who was one of the heads of the campaign against the American war in Vietnam. We have many political leaders from South Africa who actually took part in the struggle against apartheid. Okay, this is the far left. Okay. Switching to political Islamism, let me allow myself to take a bit more time, first of all, to explain to you, because I think, again, I mean, unfortunately, this subject, I think, is not clear enough, especially here in Israel, because not many people actually deal with it. Okay? So, again, I mean, we spoke about the far left, okay, which is something different from liberal left. I now turn to speak about political Islam, or Islamism, which at least in my view, is something different from Islam as a religion. Okay? So what is political Islam? And we see the main logos of the Islamist perceptions or theories here. We need to understand first, again, political Islam is not Islam. This is something different. We are talking about a group of 6 main ideologies. All started, not all, maybe, okay, I mean, Iran started in the 20th century, but okay. But the wide majority of them started in the 18th and 19th centuries as some kind of a response to British and then French and whatever colonialism. They were all anti-colonialist. Of course, they were all inspired, or not inspired, but they received some kind of a boost by the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the loss of the Caliphate, or the Khilafah, in 1924 in Turkey. Of course, I mean, they all aspire to bring all Muslims together back under the flag of Islam and under one caliph or leader. I put this section here because it also has to do with the Western side of issues, and we need to understand that all of these ideologies were also imported to the West. Actually, if you want to know, or if you want to follow almost everything which has anything to do with problems in Islam today, you will end up in one of these 6 ideologies. Okay, this is why it is important to understand that they are all global. They were all imported to the West with the Muslim immigration. Some of those who came to the West brought these ideologies with them and started their own bases there in the West. And I think what we're witnessing today globally, again, is some kind of a cold war between all of these ideologies. And again, and the main boost for this one, of course, was the Iranian Revolution, which started the main battle of lots of money between Iran, Saudi, and other and other of these that we will mention in a minute. We have among these 6 ideologies, we have 2 main groups. One of them I would call rigid or separatist. Okay, and under this title I will include, very tall for me to get there. Okay, I will include Saudi Wahhabism. Okay, and from the Indian side of things, the Indian subcontinent, we have the Islamic Academy of Deoband. Okay, this is the no, okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. So this is the Islamic Academy in Dar el-Uloom Deoband. I don't know if any of you heard of it, but this is actually considered the uncle of Saudi Wahhabism in the Indian subcontinent. This is actually the most important and the most widespread political Islamist factor in the world, although nobody really deals with it, unfortunately. Under the second group, which is more modernized or more political in the Western sense of the word, I mean something that we can also understand as Westerners. First of all, of course, the most important is the Muslim Brotherhood. Okay, I mean, we already mentioned it. I've been dealing with the Muslim Brotherhood for more than 14 years now, and for more than 8 years, especially the growing phenomenon of the Muslim Brotherhood in the West, in Europe, and in the United States. Of course, now, I mean, those of us, the very few of us who've dealt with it, could also understand and also anticipate its rise in the Middle East, which is coming from lots of very hard work, okay, and lots of money is involved inside. It is not something which came out of the blue. There is Hizb al-Tahrir, which is growing. Again, I mean, it used to be very, very strong in London. Now got a bit weaker. It has a strong base in Lebanon still, and this is a growing power here in Israel, in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. But again, I mean, something that nobody has ever touched properly before. We have what we call the Jamaat Islami, the Maududist school of thought, which is, again, I mean, considered the uncle of the Muslim Brotherhood and coming from the Indian subcontinent, or Pakistan of today, especially. And of course, last but not least, the only Shiite factor, which is Iran. Okay, but again, I mean, this is important to understand first because this is the main thesis that I have been working on for many, many years, and this is why I took the liberty of explaining it first. Okay. Now, again, I mean, still in the West, you know that in the West today, especially in Europe, the most threatening strategic issue has become what we call homegrown terrorism, meaning people who carry European passports. They are usually third generation Muslims in Europe, but still they go and try to commit terror attacks in Europe itself against their own countries, supposedly. So this is the most important concept to understand when we speak about political Islamism. About Islamism, the most important term is what we call da'wah, okay, which is all proselytizing, preaching, or actually missionary work. This is actually these people's. This is what they're aiming for. Okay, to make new crowds, to bring them under their flag. Again, not the flag of Islam, rather the flag of political Islam, which uses Islam as a political factor. Okay, and in Iran, the equivalent Iranian is of course called exporting the revolution. So usually when we speak about homegrown terrorism, this is the process. Okay, and this could be proved and has been proven, by the way. Okay. When we want to commit da'wah, what we do in the first place is actually create an alternative civic system, meaning we establish our own mosques, our own schools, our own charities, our own, when appropriate, we established our own health system. Okay, this is why, Israelis here, of course, know this structure from Hamas, and Hamas is the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. But it is actually important to understand that this is what we're aiming for in the first place. Meaning, the moment we manage to create an alternative civic system, you bring all the people under your banner, and they are not, and they don't. Slowly and gradually, this usually takes about 10 to 15 years. Okay, but has been taking place all over the world now. You eventually get into a situation when people are bound to you, meaning they don't owe anything to the country that they live in. Rather, they are loyal. They are completely loyal to you. You actually bring about a situation when you created a state within state. Okay, these people are part of your network. Okay, yeah. So this brings to loyalty. And this gradually brings to growing alienation, radicalization of people, because they also come to teach in your school, and then you also preach things which are not very which should not be accepted in the Western world, or you preach to other things. Eventually, part of them also turn to terror. Okay, again, this is a bit off the main subject. However, it is important for me to explain to you that the same factors who are involved in this campaign against Israel are also involved in radicalization of Muslim communities in the West. Okay, and I need to stress, we are talking about very small groups, but they are small. Okay, they are small, but they are well funded, well organized, and this is where their force lies. Okay, they don't have the masses behind them, but they have the ability to bring in lots of money and lots of power of organization. Okay, this is actually this is one of my favorite pictures, even though it is a bit dark to see here. Okay, because this is turning again from the whole side of political issue of political Islamism to the Muslim Brotherhood itself. Okay, again, the Muslim Brotherhood itself, like all other ideologies, have become a global phenomenon. It is estimated to be operating in about 90 countries throughout the world. It has very important centers. The UK is it's probably the most important center of its activities around the Western world. Again, there are other centers like South Africa, which haven't been looked into, unfortunately. There is also gradual, I think, strengthening of the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States. Okay, it is important to understand and to explain. The Muslim Brotherhood, again, is built on these concepts of, first of all, creating these da'wah organizations. Secondly, going into the political stage, meaning political participation. This is something that they have been entering since the end of the 1990s. especially under the global wing of Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi, that I'm sure all of you know the name. Okay, I mean, there are many groups involved there, including the European umbrella groups. I don't know if any one of you have ever heard about the Federation of Islamic Organizations in Europe, which is considered the European umbrella of the Muslim Brotherhood. There is also a religious side of it, which is called the ECFR, the European Council for Fatwa and Research. And there is also a very important financial arm to all of this globally, which is called the Union of Good. Okay, the Union of Good is a network of various, I mean, it used to be 50. I don't even know how much it is anymore because they don't publish it anymore. It used to be 50 mainly European charities affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood in Europe, which were designated in 2008 by the United States for funding Hamas. However, the Union of Good is much more than this. It is actually a global financial arm of these organizations in Europe. Okay, and of course, now under the false slogan of the Arab Spring, which is actually again, I mean, it is more of an Islamist winter than anything else. What I think, again, I mean, what we should anticipate is, since the Muslim Brotherhood would like to show itself or to portray itself like the good guy in the neighborhood, it is towards the West. I mean, it's very important for the Brotherhood now to still receive Western funding and foreign funding, for countries which are struggling now, like Egypt, of course. So what will probably start to happen is that we will start to see more and more support for terrorist organizations under the table. Okay, of course, like Hamas, they will provide platforms. And of course, okay, I mean, I will not get into this one, but we should know the Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda are not separate organizations. No, not organizations, okay, but they are not rivals, eventually. They all think about the same causes, only they just think about other ways to get there. And the Muslim Brotherhood has been connected to Al-Qaeda various times. It is falsely presented by Western writers as a main rival, okay, but it is not. Okay. So what we will probably start to see is more and more what they call now civil society or non-violent attempts to attack Israel, and actually the global march to Jerusalem is also part of this developing phenomenon. Okay, again, I mean, this is one of my favorite pictures here, just to show you what I mean by the global Muslim Brotherhood. This is the original launch of the Mavi Marmara a week ahead of the first flotilla. What we can see here, if we can see, okay, these are the main leaders. Okay, this guy is also the main leader or the main coordinator of the global march to Jerusalem, the forthcoming one. His name is Muhammad Sawalha. He is a senior member of the UK branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. In his past, he was a Hamas commander, and he fled Israel, or fled the West Bank, in 1990, being wanted by the Israeli authorities. And he has now become one of the global leaders of the whole Muslim Brotherhood thing. Okay, so he's been chief coordinator again, I mean, for the first flotilla, the second flotilla, and now for the global march to Jerusalem. This is his friend, Zaher Birawi, another Hamas activist who fled to Britain and has played the role of a spokesman for the first flotilla, again, second flotilla, so all the convoys, and now for the global march to Jerusalem. This is Hamam Saeed. He is the head of the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan, which is also, within the Middle Eastern scene, is one of the most important organizations, and it is also the father of Hamas. Okay, meaning the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan is actually in charge of Hamas. Okay. This again, I mean, it's too dark. Okay, but this is Bülent Yıldırım. He's the head of the IHH. Okay, the Turkish charity. But again, I mean, IHH is not the organizer of the flotilla, rather one of the main charities which took place or which took part in it. And the IHH is also a member of the Union of Good. Okay, so you need to understand that we are widening the circles here. It's not a Turkish flotilla, it's a Muslim Brotherhood flotilla, rather than all. Last but not least, Mr. Mahathir Mohamad, former Prime Minister of Malaysia, who has been involved in these issues as well. Mahathir Mohamad, I don't know, again, I mean, I'm not 100% sure how many of you heard of him, but he's a very important and central anti-Semite and anti-American figure. He's probably got a lot of money, I don't really know where from, but he was also the one in this specific incident, the first flotilla, was also the one to fund the most important far-left organization which took part in it, which is the ISM, the International Solidarity Movement, or they now call themselves the Free Gaza Movement. It's actually the same organization. Okay, so we have other pictures. Again, I mean, unfortunately, they're too dark at the moment, but this comes to show you this. This is actually what I try to explain here. I mean, how did the Red-Green Alliance form itself? How these people from the far left came to work so closely with the Islamists, mainly the Muslim Brotherhood in Europe. Okay, so you have various pictures of them in various incidents. Again, I mean, if this has been more lighted, you will see the same characters over and over again. Sawal Khabirawi, former UK MP George Galloway, leaders of the Stop the War coalitions and all of these ones. In all of these events and conferences that we can call, that we can say that which came under the banner of the Red-Green Alliance, these are the main people. Okay, you will always see the same characters there. Okay. Okay. Lastly, but not least. Okay. There is also, again, I mean, what we see within the framework of the global march to Jerusalem, especially. Okay, you remember that in the first. Let me go. Yeah. So, you remember that I first put this camp there as well, right? Which is interesting. Again, I mean, it hasn't been looked into too deeply, unfortunately, but it is very, very important to understand that slowly and gradually Fatah, the PLO, the Palestinian Authority itself, is also adopting the same doctrine. Okay, these are the people that Israel is trying to negotiate at the moment, but they are actually more and more involved in promoting the BDS movement on the one hand, and in supporting these flotillas, especially these marches nowadays. Again, I mean, from the very small part that I managed to understand until now, okay, and of course at the JCPA there are people who dealt with these issues much more than I, but this is some kind of a first insight into what leads the Palestinian Authority itself to support the same campaign. Okay. When we speak about the 1990s, you know, well, of course the Madrid, the Oslo Accords, and everything else. First of all, we started with the camp within Fatah and the PLO, which opposed the peace process. Okay, some of them left. Of course, notable figures like Farouk Kaddoumi, Abu Lutuf, one of the main founders and one of the closest friends to Arafat, who opposed the whole thing. We now have, again, I mean, this global march to Jerusalem is actually headed by one of these people who left. Okay, his name is Dr. Ribchi Khalum. I think, as far as I could understand, he was one of the associates of Farouk Kaddoumi, Abu Lutuf, and he is left Fatah and the PLO because of his opposing to the peace process, and he is now the main leader of the global march to Jerusalem, walking aside the Islamists, Hamas, and all of these people. Again, I mean, since the beginning of the since more than a decade now, within the Palestinian Authority itself, within the Palestinian community and authority itself of Fatah, there is also a rapid growth of civil society, NGOs, and this also means, of course, the more you work with NGOs, the more you, first of all, work with the far left elements throughout the world, and you can put yourself in touch with more of these people. Now, again, I mean, this is something which has been done here by others at the JCPA. For the past few years, the Palestinian Authority itself is also entering the same phase, meaning of promoting the international campaign to delegitimize Israel politically. It has been trying for the past 4 or 5 years to override the whole peace process. Okay, turn into what is called the Kosovo the Kosovo line. Okay, and also yeah, okay, and therefore. And therefore, many of its officials actually started to adopt these issues. We can most notable figures, at least we know until now, would be Dr. Mustafa Barghouti. He's an oppositionist, okay, but he's been tied to the BDS movement on the one hand for many years, and on the other hand, he's been having ties with the Islamist side, even though he's secular, for many years as well. We now have prominent Palestinian officials like Nabil Shat, who is deeply involved in these issues as well, as he also states. We also have Riyad al-Maliki, the current foreign minister of the Palestinian Authority. All of these people are trying to push for this direction, and they are adopting it actually. I need to say, there was a large conference of the BDS movement 2 or 3 months ago, which took place in Hebron, and I have all the YouTube clips from there. So the head of Hebron, who is the governor of Hebron, who is actually a Fatah guy, congratulates everyone who is coming there and saying something like, "I can assure you that President Abu Mazen is also supporting all civilian, non-violent elements of the struggle against Israel," meaning that it has not become yet, but maybe soon to be, it has not become an official policy of the Palestinian Authority. However, it is coming there. Okay, and we also need should also be interesting to remind another one. I found a very interesting article from 2008, March or April 2008. This is the peak of the negotiations between our former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and Abu Mazen. Okay, and we now know that in these talks, the Palestinian Authority was actually promised to be given 100% of what they asked for. But still, there is a very interesting article there in which both Palestinian PA officials and leaders of NGOs who say they work together with the Palestinian Authority say, if should these negotiations fail, we are now guided by Israeli and international peace activists, and they teach us how to initiate some kind of a non-violent intifada. Okay, we need to put together there what they actually saw as the first victory of the non-violent side of things, which was the 2007 decision by the Israeli High Court, by Bagatz, to move the security wall at the village of Bil'in. Okay, this is actually where they started seeing, okay, we can do it in a civilian way. and of course we already mentioned the Operation Cast Lead in Gaza. So this brought these people on the first place to turn into the civilian side of struggle, political side of struggle. On the other hand, I haven't mentioned it yet, but on the Islamist side, this is probably the most important point of the opening of this stage. There was a series of meetings or conferences held in Istanbul, in Turkey. Okay, Turkey is one of the most important countries in the world today which support the Sunni Islamist line alongside Qatar. And there was straight after Operation Cast Lead, there was a series of conferences which took place there, in which many Islamist leaders from throughout the world came. And again, I mean, here or there, you can also see it was not only Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, rather Salafi leaders and also people who are connected and affiliated with Al-Qaeda. They all came together to discuss how to rebuild resistance against Israel, how to rebuild Hamas, and how to rebuild the whole struggle. And they actually spoke about these issues. They actually spoke about resistance or mukawama, and on the other hand, they also had lessons and lectures. I mean, I have all of this now. They also heard how to organize a non-violent demonstration, how to act against Israel in the legal way, and all of this was there. Okay, and attending were leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood and leaders of Al-Qaeda. Okay, so you see, again, so gradually you see that all of these factors, each coming from his own reasons, are actually joining hands through these coalitions. Okay, and of course, the Islamists, I haven't dealt with the European far right because this is not as well organized as the European far left yet. But the more the Islamist side is involved in this global campaign, the more they bring in, first of all, the direct jihadi elements. Okay, and again, I mean, and I'm talking about designated terrorist organizations, and on the other hand, they are bringing together the far right elements in Europe. Okay, so you see, this is some kind of a very strange coalition, but each one of them has an interest of being together. and this is the main strength for this coalition on the one hand. However, it is also the main point of weakness for this coalition, because again, I mean, these are all coalitions which supposedly hate each other. They only come together for the purpose of working against Israel. Okay, and the more the circles are widening, especially to the margins and to the far left, right, whatever, the more we also see that these people turn against one another. Okay, but in order to conclude, I think we need to understand, first of all, this is very, very important. None of these elements is condemning resistance. Okay, again, I mean, resistance, mukawama, is what we call terror. It is important to stress that for none of these elements there, especially the core of activists, the non-violent side of activism does not come instead of resistance, rather comes aside of it. Okay? Okay, secondly, as we said, the Muslim Brotherhood, being the most organized Islamist force throughout the world, is very important there because it brings in lots of money that the far left doesn't have. Okay, there is no Soviet country anymore, and these are very little and fringe groups, but the Islamist money, or the Islamist element of putting money in, is growing, and we already saw in the forthcoming, in our forthcoming report, for example, we already saw a whole BDS campaign ran in Europe specifically by the Muslim Brotherhood in Europe. Okay, as we said, the circles are widening on the one hand. However, they are widening to the fringe. There are more extremist forces coming in. Okay, and of course, I can only complete my lecture here by quoting maybe Norman Finkelstein, one of the most severe critics of Israel around the world. This is only one of recent examples of the growing tensions between the various people involved there. Recently, Norman Finkelstein was interviewed, and he actually attacked the BDS movement. He said, "You should be straightforward and say that our aim is to destroy Israel." Okay, and this is we're hearing from Norman Finkelstein. Okay, who is not very much a Zionist, as you probably all know. But again, so just to conclude, we have a very interesting picture. The circles are widening, however, they are widening to the fringe. On the other hand, there is growing participation of the Palestinian Authority itself, and this is something that we need to think about.